Good afternoon. I'm
Good
Beth
afternoon.
Keller from the Highland Park Public Library. I'm joined by my colleagues Raz Topolsky at Vernon Area Public Library and Kate Cundiff at Algonquin Area Public Library. We would like to welcome you to today's program, Ukraine's Art and Architecture Under Mortal Threat. We're pleased to welcome art historian Konstantin Akinsha. Today's special program is presented by a partnership of your public libraries and is hosted by Algonquin Area Public Library, Cook Memorial Public Library, Ela Area Public Library, Glencoe Public Library, Highland Park Public Library, and Vernon Area Public Library. I'd now like it to turn it over to Raz Topolsky to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. I just want to tell everyone a little bit about our guests for today. Konstantin Akinsha is an art historian, curator, and an expert on art expropriated during World War II. Among his books is Beautiful Loot, the Soviet Plunder of Europe's Art Treasure. He studied at the Shevchenko Art School in Kiev, Ukraine, and in 1986 completed a master's in art history at the Moscow State University in Russia. He obtained his candidate of art history at the Research Institute of Art History in Moscow in 1990 and started a PhD at the University of Andrews in Scotland in 2005. He has been curator at the Museum of Western and Oriental Art in Kiev, Ukraine, and he was a European correspondent for Art News and a contributing editor to the magazine for many years. His work is also brought him
many years, because it was going until the moment Art News was sold and basically ceased to exist in the old form, which was, I think, 2015, 2016, when unfortunately the old Art News stopped to exist.
I want to tell everyone a little bit about your work in the United States, because while he's based in Europe, Konstantin spent a lot of time in the United States as well. While in Washington, D.C., he was the Deputy Research Director, Art and Cultural Property for the Presidential Advisory Commission on Holocaust Assets in the United States. He was also a Eugene and Davmel Shklar Fellow at the Ukrainian Research Institute at Harvard. And also spent some time in Chicago. He was a guest curator at the Art Institute for 3 years and has also taught and done research on the East Coast, New York, Boston, Maryland. So we're really pleased to have him with us today. His current work was brought to our attention when he was published in the Wall Street Journal earlier this month on this topic. And so we reached out to get a chance to learn from him about his knowledge and his experience about the situation in Ukraine. So Konstantin, I just want to welcome you to our webinar. And I guess I thought just before you started and talking about what's happening, I thought maybe you could just tell us, where are you right now? Where are you based?
Yeah, in the moment I am in Budapest. And I am basically living in Italy and partly in Hungary. My mother lived in Hungary. And in reality, I'm traveling all the time, and it's project by project basis, because I just spent 2 years in Germany being a fellow in Max Weber College in Erfurt. So very often I'm spending time everywhere, but not in my home. So
okay. And I know you're going to get into kind of what's happening in Ukraine right now, but I know you're also very close to this subject, and you know a lot of people that are directly impacted by this situation. And so I just wanted to ask, how are you? This sounds like a very personal and close thing, to be dealing with. So how are you doing?
It's very difficult. It's very difficult from an emotional point of view. And I can give you an example, because now I'm trying I postponed everything what I was doing. I basically temporarily put all projects on ice, and I'm fully concentrated on Ukrainian projects and attempts to help in practical way, in attempts to attract attention to the cultural destruction, because I feel now that I am writing an article a day. I'm publishing these articles in all possible newspapers, from the United States to Germany, UK, etc., etc. But I want to give you one example that very often it's just difficult to, to keep composure, to react normally, because I have a funny situation, because a few years ago I started to talk to the National Gallery of Scotland about possibility of big exhibition on Ukrainian modernism. And of course, this exhibition had to be realized in collaboration with the National Museum of Ukraine. You can imagine it's a big museum, it's a very long process, we exchanging proposals. And finally, we planned meeting with museum curators and directors, which was planned a month in advance, and the meeting coincided with the second day of the bombing of Kiev. What I could tell them, I said that unfortunately our plan doesn't work anymore. We don't know what will happen to this collection. We have fully changed it, and I came with a plan B, and plan B is that we will do this exhibition, but without works from Ukraine. We will take works from private collections in the West, from European collections and American museum collections, but we will do it. And now we already have Museum Thyssen-Bornemisza in Madrid, Museo Nazionale, Museum Ludwig Museum in Köln, who for sure are joining this exhibition, and we are searching for other venues. And I think that very soon we will have 3-4 venues and we'll be ready to roll. But I thought that, even when it's impossible to take works from the National Museum of Ukraine, it could be nice to involve them even on symbolical line, to write that we are doing this in cooperation with them. So I'm trying to reach the director, and I'm getting the director 30 minutes after she learned that her cousin was summarily executed on the outskirts of Kiev, because many people in Kiev who are not military are going to so-called territorial defense, which is basically self-defense units. Can you imagine my conversation with this director? It's horrible. And I have to say that many people in museums, many people in institutions are behaving fully heroic. Unfortunately, and we will return to this issue, many museums in Ukraine were not evacuated for different reasons. We will discuss these reasons. And now collections are, in the best case, taken downstairs and packed and stored in cellars. So directors and curators are basically living in the cellars. They cannot leave them, because if they will go home, it's they cannot return back in case of emergency, because it's you cannot work in night. It's a martial rule. So they live in the cellars. Like in one of the biggest museums of Ukraine, which I don't want to mention the day, 5 women barricaded themselves in this cellar. They bought a lot of food, water, etc. And they are sitting there. They're not going out because they close the door so good that they can come out. And I'm talking to them and saying, what are you doing? Because, so what you will do? If Russians will come, how you will defend this art? But they are staying there. And it's, of course, extremely, extremely dangerous situation. We will talk about these dangers. And I want to start this conversation describing you situation in museums. And this situation is extremely great. You already mentioned that some time ago, I published an article in the Wall Street Journal, which was dedicated to the problem of evacuation of museum collections. I published it before the war came the shape which it came today. Unfortunately, it was impossible to evacuate museum collections of Ukraine. And this impossibility is understandable. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of objects and numerous cities. Of course, some cities were cut out in the very beginning, like, for example, Kharkiv. And we will return to the Kharkiv Museum a bit later. But museums of Kiev practically were not evacuated. And one of the reasons was that before the beginning of the war, I think that Ukrainian leadership made a mistake. Those of you who were following political developments probably remember that at some moment President Zelensky even started to bicker with President Biden, saying that Americans are coming daily with doom and gloom scenarios. And in reality, the situation is not so bad. So evacuation was not realized because in that moment, the officials believed that if we will start to move museum collections, it will provoke panic. So panic did not happen, but the collections were not evacuated easily. And we have, I can give you only, for example, let's talk about Kiev. There are, of course, other museums, and Kiev has all in all more than 30 museums. There are museums of all possible types, but some of them are extremely important. You see on the screen this golden Scythian pectoral breastplate, which is in the collection of Museum of Ukrainian National Museum of Historical Treasures. This museum have the best collections of Scythian gold, but many other things which are coming from early history to 19th century. It's roughly 75,000 objects. We have National Museum of Ukrainian Art, which is full of anthological examples of Ukrainian art, masterpieces, starting with early medieval icons and finishing with Ukrainian avant-garde of the 20th century. It is not evacuated yet. All the collections are in the cellar of the museum, and museum is nicely located basically in stone's throw from the building of the Cabinet of Ministers and from the presidential administration, which obviously are targets of choice for Russian missile attacks. I think that one of the reasons why this evacuation was not realized also was that nobody, I think that even people who had access to intelligence, etc., could imagine that this war will take such shape. Nobody could imagine that Russians will bomb and shell cities with population from 1 to 3 million. You understand that it's not any kind of precise shelling. It's just dropping bombs and shooting rockets without even thinking about targets. So it's an absolutely horrible situation. But situation is horrible not only in Kiev. It's horrible in the other cities too. And to give you some examples, I want to show you some situations like in the city of Kharkiv. You probably read a lot about Kharkiv. Kharkiv now is nicknamed the Ukrainian Stalingrad. It's very interesting because we cannot find any other comparisons than comparisons from the Second World War history. So Kharkiv became Ukrainian Stalingrad. Mariupol is very often referred as a siege of Leningrad reincarnated. So Kharkiv is the second biggest city in Ukraine, which has interesting museum collections, especially Museum of Fine Arts, which is you know, big collection mainly of Russian art. What is a paradoxical? Because one of officially declared objectives of the Putin's war against Ukraine was a kind of liberation of Russian-speaking population from Ukrainian yoke. So far, the cities which were mostly damaged are the cities with predominantly Russian population, and many of cultural monuments which were damaged are monuments which are connected mainly with Russian culture. In Kharkiv, the museum, fortunately, was not fully destroyed. The explosion happened near it. It just lost practically all windows. You can see this on the screen, I hope. And the irony of the situation was that museum staff was not even able to remove paintings from the walls before this attack. Because another thing which you have to keep in mind, Ukraine is Ukraine. It's not a rich country. We are not talking about German or Swiss of American museums. These museums are usually understaffed. Minority of staff are women, sometimes aged, and they just have no possibility to remove, even to remove paintings from the walls. So after this Kharkiv museum was damaged, many of volunteers came, and only with their help, collection could be packed and moved somewhere in relatively secure place. But security of this place is very questionable. So the parody of the situation, that the main part of the collection of this museum are basically extremely important paintings of Russian art, as for example, this painting of Ilya Repin depicting Ukrainian Kazakhs writing a letter to the Turkish Sultan. Finally, after this incident, the director of the museum, Valentina Mizgina, came with very good comment, and she was, of course, shocked. She is Russian speaking, she is Russian ethnically, and she said that never in her life she could imagine that she will be obliged to protect Russian classical paintings from Russian shells. Yeah, that's the situation. And the situation is that what we are facing, we really did not face in the Second World War. We are facing methodical destruction of cities, which could be compared to, I don't know, to Rotterdam, to Guernica. It's up to you. I wanted to show you, and it's kind of absolutely shocking. And so I just want to show you random destruction of the city of Kharkiv. Of course, everybody paid a lot of attention to the destruction of and danger of destruction of constructivist monuments. Kharkiv is a city of modern architecture. Basically, part of it was constructed in the beginning of the 20th century, but after the revolution, it became an important center because from 1917 to 1920 to 1934, it was the capital of the Soviet Ukraine. So it was a showcase. The city of gigantic constructivist buildings, which had to celebrate Soviet modernity. And in a sense, it was used like counterweight to the ancient architecture of the city of Kyiv. But I think that if constructivist buildings are very known and they have probably more of international value and provoking interest, the architecture of the beginning of the 20th century is interesting too. It's important. And in front of you is a house which is on the list of Ukrainian national monuments, which was constructed.
Konstantin, you know, right now the image that we're seeing is still from your blog. I don't think you're sharing.
Sorry. You please
That's okay.
correct me.
Yeah.
You please correct me because
I'll stick around until we get that right one up. Now we can see the pictures of the buildings. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And
Thank
I want to take you through a short excursion from through Kharkiv today. So this building is it's probably not the most important architectural treasure, but for me it's very sad because it's still on the list of the monuments of Ukrainian architectural heritage. And many of these buildings of Belle Epoque now are destroyed even more than constructivist architecture. In the moment, I am working with a photographer from Kharkiv who saw my blog, contacted me, and told me that he wants to make a project. He is documenting every day new destructions of Kharkiv buildings. And I'm trying to help him because he urgently needs a bulletproof vest and the helmet because he is working in a very dangerous situation and these shells are falling around him. So that's what you can see today in Kharkiv. You see, it's building after building, it's destruction after destruction. It's really horrible. This is, for example, is a very important building of the beginning of the 20th century. It was constructed, finished in 1916, one of few buildings which they continued to construct during the First World War. And it was a gigantic luxury house, tenant house, which belonged in that moment to the insurance company called Russia. After the revolution, it was used as a seat of the People's Commissariat of Labor and was nicknamed the Palace of Labor. So, I'm sorry. And this building was fully and completely destroyed during the last attacks. It's a shame. It's a building important in architectural sense, and you can see how it looks inside now. This is the interior. This is a constructivist building, which is a part of the university, and you see its shape too. But it's building after building. We are going through the very central part of Kharkiv. This is the interiors of this Palace of Labor. In the window, you can see the building of so-called Держпром, building of state industry, which is the biggest constructivist building in the Soviet Union, if not in the world. It was a huge complex on the central square of Kharkiv. It's already damaged too. It still was not directly aimed by the Russian rockets, but it is not in very good shape. So we have streets and streets and streets and streets. It's absolutely merciless, horrible destruction of the city, important cultural center, and that's the situation in which Ukraine lives today. So, what could be done in this situation? It's absolutely unclear. I think that there are many efforts to somehow provide help, but unfortunately, it's not clear how this help could be provided. In the moment, the best which international community is trying to do is to collect packing materials. These materials are collected in the city of Krakow, and to deliver these materials to the deliver these materials to the Polish-Ukrainian border. Different monuments are constantly under attack. These monuments could be little local museums, like this little museum in Aktyrka, little village not far from Sumy, which is what we are calling in German Heimat Museum, with a collection of local historical collections, collections of folk art, and here you can see what is left of it. That could be religious monuments, because it's strange, because we have permanent Russian attacks on the religious buildings. I am not sure that it's done on purpose, but it's happening. This is a monastery, very beautiful monastery, stunningly beautiful monastery. I cannot say that it's super important architecturally. It's old, but all the buildings of beginning of 16th century were reconstructed in 19th century. There are still parts of it which are quite valuable as architectural legacy. So this monastery was shelled recently. It was damaged. You can see the damage. The problem was that not only destruction of architecture, of course, this destruction is highly important, but we are talking about human lives, and the monastery was a refuge for numerous refugees, among whom were many children. Some of these children were wounded, and the story is repeating and repeating every day. Now we're facing another very tragic and dangerous situation, because from one hand, I told you about Kiev. Kiev is constantly attacked, it's constantly bombed, and many military analysts believe that unfortunately Russians could try to storm the city. If they will try to storm the city, of course, it will be horrible. I don't know what we can say about the fate of the cultural property, about the fate of monasteries, architectural monuments, museums. This is absolutely unpredictable. But there are other cities, and we have a very serious situation in the southern part of the country. You probably read, if you are following the news, if you are watching daily report from Ukraine, you read about Mariupol, which I already mentioned. The city now practically doesn't exist anymore. It was a medium-sized city with mixed Ukrainian and Greek population. It was probably the biggest community of ethnic Greeks in Ukraine. And the city basically is more or less contemporary. There are elements of 19th century surviving quarters, and it was one museum. It's a little museum, but it was a very charming museum in the nice Belle Epoque villa. It was again dedicated to Russian artists. The name of this artist is Arkhip Kuinj. He was of Greek descent and became extremely important in the mid-19th century. He was a landscape painter with some touch of magic color. It was even discussion how he is making his paintings so luminescent, and that he probably has some secret. This is a version of the famous painting, The Red Sunset on the Dnieper. And the actual painting, I can say that it is sketch, or the first version. The actual version of this painting is in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. I'm not sure that it's exhibited, but it's in their collection. So this museum doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if this painting survived. I don't know what is left of it, because the building was bombed, that area was bombed. We don't have information from the city. The city is cut out. It's in siege. Russians are not letting out refugees. And of course, nobody cares now about this museum and could this painting survive under the ruins, because people have absolutely different objectives. And but this is done. This is already destroyed. But one of the main concerns which we have, and this is a very serious concern, it's a situation in Odessa. It's a legendary city. It's a very big cultural center. It's a crossroad of all possible cultures. You know, it's traditionally was a main Jewish city of Ukraine. It's city with a Greek minority, still with Italian minority, which is still the German minority, Armenian minority, just name the name. Tatars, Ukrainians, Russians, everything which you can imagine. And it's a central part of the city. It's a beautiful early 19th century classicist part. So what will happen with this part? This monument, which you see now piled with sandbags, it's a symbol of Odessa. It's a monument to the 5th Duke of Richelieu, who was an emigrant from the revolutionary France, who was governor of the city during the days of Alexander I. So will these sandbags protect the monument in case of Russian missile attack? I don't know. And you can see that the image is iconic, and it really looks like surrealist painting and something which could be probably created by De Chirico, but it's difficult to imagine this in reality. Odessa, of course, has not only architectural monuments, it has quite a few important museums. Beautiful museum of fine art, mainly concentrated on Russian and Ukrainian art. An important museum of Western and Oriental art, which includes masterpieces of Franz Hals, such as two images of evangelists, of Mark and Matthew, and the third painting is in the Getty Museum in LA. Did Odessa people have time to evacuate these paintings? I'm not sure. I hope that yes, but much likely they're still sitting in the cellar of the museum. So, is Kharkiv with a crime which already happened? Odessa is standing in line. Russians are obviously preparing for landing. All the museums and this beautiful square are situated in the proximity of the seaport, which will be the first target of the Russian attack. So we only can brace for horrible news. This is the main thing which we are now facing. Of course, as I told you, international community is trying to activate, to offer something to Ukraine. But I hope that at some moment the Ukrainian government will understand that these treasures, anyway, those treasures who are in safety now, and we have only relatively safe place in the country, which in the moment is the city of Lviv, which is beautiful, ancient European city. It was changing hands many times, which belonged to Kingdom of Poland, belonged to Austro-Hungary, etc. We hope that the city will be not destroyed, we hope that that area will be not bombed. But recently, Russians already few times attacked vicinities of Lviv. It was more attacks against military installation in airports, but nobody said that they will not attack the city. So I hope that the government will decide, and it's my plea to the government, that it's necessary to evacuate certain collections which are in Lviv and move them to the storages of European museums. I think that European museums are quite open for such possibility and ready to help. In this very moment, everybody ready to help. There are many initiatives. You probably heard about American initiatives to help with, let's say, preserving digital archives of the museums. But the problem is that not so many museums in Ukraine have digital archives. So we will see what will happen. I want to add one thing, because of course we are concentrating on a stunning collection of extremely rare books, starting with the medieval manuscripts and going up. All of this in one storage. The storage is relatively contemporary, like 80-ish, concrete building, which will not withstand any serious bombardment. So what will happen with this stuff? And also I want to address one other issue, which is situation with Jewish legacy. Because, you know, Jewish legacy of Ukraine, which was probably the most Jewish part of the Russian Empire, it was practically all of the country was in the Pale of Settlement. It was the biggest Jewish population. They was extremely strongly damaged during the Second World War and during the Soviet period, when after the war we had sometimes open and sometimes badly hidden anti-Semitic campaigns. So the synagogues was closed, used for different purposes. I can give you a peculiar example, because when I was basically a child in Kyiv, I was going to the Choral Synagogue frequently and to the Karaim Synagogue once a week. In Choral Synagogue was a puppet theater, and in the Karaim Synagogue was a cinema house. So that's what happened to Jewish legacy during the Soviet days. After the independence of Ukraine, Jewish life returned to certain normality, if not to say very active form. Communities were formed, rabbis arrived from mainly from America and Israel. Synagogues were restored, so it became like quite vibrant Jewish life. Now, these remains of the Jewish legacy, which were restored and attracted attention, are under full threat. I don't want to mention, probably all of you knew that Russians succeeded even to bomb Babin Yar. That was not made of purpose. They were aiming into the Kyiv TV tower, but anyway, the bomb exploded on the territory of the memorial complex. But they're not only aiming for it, because we already read reports about bombardments of the city of Uman, which is a Hasidic capital of Ukraine, if not of the world, because the rabbi of Bratslav is buried there. Fortunately, they did not aim yet his grave, but they succeeded to destroy yeshiva there. The city of Zhytomyr, which is another very important historical Jewish center, is under constant bombardment, and it has a lot of important 19th century buildings connected with the Jewish life. In Zhytomyr, they just recently succeeded to restore ancient synagogue. It did not survive too much, only the frontal wall survived, but they nicely restored it, and now, of course, it's damaged again. So I'm afraid that this heritage, which was not well preserved and now was rediscovered, became a part of Jewish life. Now again is in the danger of complete elimination. So that is what I wanted to tell you, and maybe we can move to the questions.
Konstantin, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and all the effort you put into this. We do have some questions, and I want to quickly remind people that we are still accepting questions. Feel free to use the Q&A feature to submit them to us, and we'll get them to Konstantin. Before we do so, though, I just wanted to quickly mention that a poll is going to appear on your screen for 10 to 15 seconds. We just want to get a feel for how many folks are watching at home today. So you can take just a minute to answer that. And while Raz is displaying that, we're going to move into our first question. Konstantin, based on experience following previous wars, how can a museum or a country rebuild its art collection?
You know, it's a very interesting question, because, for example, what we are facing now, we don't know yet, because, to be precise, Russians did not succeed yet to destroy major museums. We have, of course, the first case of looting, because a museum in provincial but very stunning country estate was looted by Russian soldiers. It's not any kind of premeditated, well-organized removal of museum collections by special forces of the country. It was just a random robbery. They carried out everything which they could lift, but you know, including some important and valuable objects for local history. But what will happen in the big cities? What we still, you know, Putin forces were marching to Ukraine for blitzkrieg, and were planning to take Kyiv in 3 days. So far, they cannot take the city of Mariupol, which they already turned into the rock. So I'm not so much afraid of removal of museum collections. However, of course, we have a danger. We obviously have a danger, because the city of Kherson, it's only city, relatively big city, occupied by Russians. And Kherson has a decent museum with, again, collection of Russian art, with few paintings by Ivazovsky, who was very important seascape painter, valuable for Russian culture. What they will do with this museum, we don't know yet, because they cannot subjugate the city. They want to create the puppet republic, but every day population is going with protests, organizing meetings, etc., and clashing with the Russian forces. So we don't know what will happen there. But what I am afraid, which I already mentioned, it's just artillery hit, explosion of bomb, stray rocket going either into the museum or into the monument of architecture. What we will do if a bomb will fall on the St. Sophia Cathedral with its exclusive Byzantine mosaics? We cannot reconstruct it. That will be gone. Maybe we can reconstruct the building. Of course, it will become a fake. It will be, you know, new building. We had the story with, you know, probably in Dresden, Marienkirche, which after reunification was composed of little stone fragments. It looks like real church, but it's not the real church anymore. But how to replace museum collections? There is no way for this. if Ukrainian National Museum will be destroyed, there is no replacement. And what we are seeing here, and what I want to say, it's not just a crime against Ukraine, it's a crime against world culture. And we are not able to stop it now because all attempts of Ukrainians to negotiate with the Russian government, all attempts of President Biden somehow to stop this war, not going into the closing of Ukrainian sky and announcing a non-fly zone, are not helping. It's continuing. So there is no replacement. I don't believe that Ukraine will use Russian strategy of confiscating the Russian collections in the case of victory and replacing the lost Ukrainian art treasures. You cannot confiscate. You cannot. There are no ways to, exchange what will be destroyed or what will be theoretically could be taken from other museums. That's the main question. There is no way to replace it. No replacement.
Great, thank you. So I know you spoke on this a little, but then what is being done now to preserve the art that's still intact?
The main thing, and of course I cannot give you all the examples. In some cases I just not in freedom to tell what was done because this information has to be not disclosed. But some museum directors made unbelievable things. Like in one museum, director who is a relatively young woman, Russian shelling, the first Russian shelling on the first day of war, started in 5 o'clock in the morning. 6 o'clock in the morning, all the stuff was in the museum. Nothing was done before this, unfortunately, but anyway. So all of them are there. They understand that they cannot do it by themselves. So they starting to work funds, and this museum is connected. It's a collection of old art, but contemporary art too. So they drafted all contemporary artists in the city. All these artists came. And one day they packed all this museum fully. They worked like from 6 o'clock in the morning to the deep night. Everything was packed. Everything was moved to the relatively safe storages. Of course, and in the end of the day, in a couple of weeks, they succeeded to evacuate majority of this collection, majority, not everything, but majority of the most valuable things to Lviv. So that was perfect. But in general, only way which is available now, pray to God that your museum has a deep cellar. If you have a deep cellar, you are already kind of winner, which depends, of course, on the type of bomb which will fall on your roof. Because if it will be half a ton bomb for destruction of fortifications, your cellar will not save. Yeah, so packing, moving, storing in the cellars, praying to God that it will be safe. Because now, it was still like a week, 2 weeks ago, it was possible to move these collections to the west of the country. Now you can imagine the situation. A convoy of trucks, usually like very colorful trucks with logos for shipment of art, it's an obvious target for any plane. And to run them through for kilometers and kilometers, miles and miles through the whole country, it's just impossible. It's impossible also because of the state of the roads, because of some roads were already blocked. So you have to protect them where you are. And of course, there are shortages of everything. I mentioned already today that Western museums are trying to deliver emergency help, packing materials. It was a funny situation because I'm participate in these different groups who are dealing with this story. It's like a phone call from the city of Zaporizhia, and they're saying we have to protect the sculptures, and we have sand, but we have no bags. Can you find us bags? So how we can find sitting in, I don't know, London, Berlin, etc., bags for Zaporizhia? It's another story. We found these bags because it was question of paying money. We did it, but it's a daily problems. And again, I'm impressed by heroic conduct of many museum officials who are doing this. It's really stunning.
Thank you for your thoughtful answer. You had mentioned while you were talking and showing us parts of your blog about Ukraine's Jewish legacy. And there's a lot of questions here from participants that want to know, have the Jewish synagogues been bombed or destroyed? Are there any efforts being made to protect the Torahs? What can you tell us about that?
I can tell you about this, and now I have no minute, but I want really maybe this weekend to find some time and to write about Jewish legacy in them. Because first, we have a lot of Jewish material in museums. It's one story, but another situation is with synagogue, with Jewish community. I want to put on my screen one photograph, which not just about culture, but about which could be kind of partial answer. I'm sorry, I'm trying to escape from here. It's important photograph. 1 second. It's for me, it's very important. I know people who are photographed, so but I will continue to answer your question when I'm searching for this photograph. What to do? Of course, communities are taking extremely active effort in defense of Ukraine. It's extremely stunning to which extent Ukrainian Jewry is demonstrating patriotic feelings. Many people are going into the army. I can give you just one example what's going on in Dnipro, which is one of the biggest Jewish community in Ukraine. It's a city with this is a photograph which I wanted to show you. It's a synagogue of Dnipro. I'm sorry, I'm becoming too emotional. So these people are going to the front. I'm very sorry. It's Rabbi Asher Cherkasky, who is a military chaplain, the Ukrainian army, and he fought David. And these people going without to fight. For me, it was simply very difficult. I am very sorry because it's too emotionally difficult to talk about all of this. So these people doing what they can, and of course, we have all our rabbis where they have to be, because Rabbi of Dnipro is in Dnipro and Rabbi of Kiev is in Kiev. Of course, they're trying to save Torahs, etc., but to which extent it will be possible? Well, we don't know this. And for example, in Kharkiv, synagogue is already damaged. It was not direct hit, but explosion was near the synagogue. The interior is damaged, all windows are out, everything is broken. And I am very, very nervous about this because it's horrible, horrible situation. Again, sorry for my emotion. On this side, I could not sustain myself. So, of course, now I think some things will be evacuated from. I know that Hasidim organized evacuation from Dnipro. They took old people, children. Sorry.
Don't apologize.
So we will see what will happen, but the danger is very high, and for me, it's very painful. Is the very painful thing that we started it, because it's huge life started too.
Well, again, don't feel the need to apologize.
Yeah, sorry, I composed myself. I'm sorry.
No worries. It's an emotional time for a lot of people. We got lots of questions and lots of interest from our attendees here today, but at this time we are going to wrap up. Konstantin, we thank you so much for making this work on such short notice and giving us some insight into what's going on. I want to welcome back Roz and Beth to help me say goodbye. And
I want to, if I will be permitted, I am very grateful to you. I think that we have to talk about it. I think that people have to know about it. And we need awareness. We need people to understand what's happening there, what's happening in the field. Thank you very much for your interest in this work. And thanks to all participants who were interested to attend this talk.
Thank you so much, Konstantin. It was really just an honor to get to meet you and to talk to you and to learn about this topic. So thank you for joining us. I've put your blog in the chat so that anyone who wants to continue to follow on this topic can see. I know you're updated every day or so with more pictures and information about what's happening. So I encourage anyone who's watching to save that link and to continue to check it out so you can see how the situation is evolving. So thank you, Konstantin, for joining us. And Kate and
Thank you very much.
Partners here today, for everyone joining us at home that kind of just took the time to just learn and kind of educate ourselves about this topic. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Konstantin. And thank you, Roz, for really putting this program together for all of us. And Konstantin, there are some wonderful wishes in the chat, some comments that everyone is sending their best wishes in the chat. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you, Konstantin.
Thank you, goodbye.